Turn the car around. Now, Joel whispered, his fingers digging into my arm as if the air itself had turned dangerous. His voice was low but sharp enough to cut through the soft hum of the engine. My chest tightened. I didn't ask why. I just listened. The wheel felt heavy in my hands as I swung the car around on the empty road. The headlights stretched into the dark trees, and for a moment all I could hear was the pounding of my own heart. Joel's eyes stayed locked on the rearview mirror, his jaw stiff, every muscle in his body coiled like he was ready for a fight. We had just left his parents' house after one of those long family dinners that stretched too late, filled with wine, laughter, and the small tensions that nobody names. It should have been an ordinary night, the kind that ended with us crawling into bed, but the way Joel's voice cracked with urgency told me this wasn't ordinary. 8 years of marriage had taught me one thing. When he used that tone, it meant danger. Not imagined, not exaggerated, but real. And even though my stomach twisted with confusion, I pressed the gas and trusted him, not knowing that moment of obedience would shatter everything I thought I knew about my family. The road stretched ahead, quiet and empty, but inside the car my mind was anything but calm. I kept glancing at Joel, hoping for some sort of explanation. His face was unreadable, set like stone, eyes forward as if he didn't even notice me watching. I asked him once, softly, what had happened back there to make him react that way. He only shook his head and muttered, "Not now." That answer settled in my chest like a rock. Not now. It was the kind of response that meant he knew something he wasn't ready to share. My hands tightened on the steering wheel, the silence between us louder than any words. I could see his knuckles pressed white against his leg where he was gripping his jean. Whatever he had seen, it wasn't small. The drive back felt longer than it should have, though we were covering the same road. My mind ran in circles. Had we forgotten something at the house? Did he notice someone following us? Every possibility only made me more uneasy. I tried again, asking if he was all right, but he gave me that same quiet refusal. His silence was worse than shouting. When we pulled into the driveway, the house stood in the dark like it always did, porch light glowing faintly. Yet something about it felt off, like stepping into a place you thought you knew, and realizing it didn't quite fit anymore. We weren't supposed to be home this early. Normally we would still be on the road, maybe even stopping for coffee on the way. I had the strange sense that arriving at this hour might expose something we weren't meant to see. I parked, and for a moment neither of us moved. The keys clicked in my hand, too loud for the stillness. Joel finally spoke, his voice calmer but firm. "Let's just go inside." I nodded, though my chest felt tight. As we walked up the path, the air around us was heavy, almost pressing. My skin prickled like I had stepped into cold water. The front door creaked when I pushed it open, and the sound echoed in the quiet house. Usually, there was comfort in coming home, shoes by the door, the faint scent of candles I liked to burn. But tonight, everything seemed too still. Inside, the lights were off except for a faint glow coming from the back hallway. It was strange because we hadn't left any lights on when Joel's eyes flicked toward it, then back to me, and he gave the smallest shake of his head. No words. Just that silent warning again. I felt the weight of the moment settle in. He knew something was waiting for us here. I didn't know what it was yet, but the unease in his body told me it wasn't good. The house, normally warm and familiar, felt foreign. The air was thick with a quiet tension, and each step deeper inside only made me more certain that Joel had been right to tell me to turn the car around. Something was wrong. Something was waiting. And though I didn't understand it yet, I could feel the truth pressing close, just out of sight. The air inside felt wrong the second I stepped through the doorway. At first glance, everything looked normal, but small details began to catch my attention. On the kitchen counter, 2 glasses sat side by side, beads of water still sliding down their sides. I knew I hadn't left them there. We hadn't even been home since the morning. My stomach tightened. A faint scent drifted through the room, light and floral, nothing like the candles I used or the perfume I wore. It clung to the air like an unwelcome guest, making my skin prickle. I turned toward Joel, but he was already moving, his shoulders squared, his pace steady and deliberate. He didn't hesitate, as though he had been expecting this. I followed him quietly, each step heavier than the last. The glow from the back hallway grew stronger, spilling out like it was daring us to come closer. My throat went dry, and my hands felt numb, yet I couldn't stop myself. Joel reached the end of the hall first. His body stiffened, his hand hovering near the doorknob of the guest bedroom. He pushed it open, slow and careful, and what I saw inside sent a chill straight through me. Marin, my cousin, her hair a mess, her face flushed, stumbling as she tried to pull her shirt over her head. She froze when she saw me, wide-eyed, her mouth opening and closing like she was searching for words that didn't exist. Before I could even process it, another figure appeared behind her. Wyatt, my brother-in-law. His shirt hung loose, buttons undone, his expression darkening the second his eyes landed on us standing in the doorway. Time seemed to stop. For a moment, no one moved. My breath caught in my throat, my heart hammering so hard I could feel it in my ears. The reality of what I was seeing struck fast and merciless, like a knife twisting in my chest. My own family, tangled together in a betrayal I hadn't even imagined. Marin stepped forward, stammering something I couldn't hear. The words slid past me as though they were meaningless sounds. All I could feel was the ground falling out from under me. My cousin, someone I had grown up with, someone who had been in my home countless times, standing there half-dressed in the middle of the night. And Wyatt, Joel's own brother, following behind her as though none of it mattered. Joel didn't speak. His face was pale, his jaw tight, his whole body trembling with the kind of rage that comes from holding too much inside. I couldn't look at him for long because I knew if I did, I'd break. The sight in front of me was enough to split everything I thought I knew in half. The betrayal wasn't distant, not something happening to other people. It was right here in my own home, with the two people I least expected. The sharp edge of shock cut deep, leaving nothing but silence heavy in the room. Marin was the first to speak, her voice shaky and uneven. She tugged at her shirt, fumbling with the fabric as if covering herself could erase what we had just seen. "Clara, it's not what it looks like," she said, her eyes darting between me and Joel. The words fell flat, hollow and desperate, carrying no weight against the obvious truth. Wyatt stepped forward, his lips twisting into something that looked almost like a smirk. He let out a laugh, low and forced, as if the situation could somehow be brushed aside. "Come on," he said, his tone mocking. "You're overreacting. We were just talking." His attempt at humor made the room colder. There was nothing funny in what stood before us. I couldn't move. My body felt heavy, as though the air itself had turned to stone. My stomach churned, a wave of sickness climbing through me. The way they stood there, too close, too familiar, told me this wasn't an accident or a mistake. This wasn't the first time. The way Marin avoided my eyes, the way Wyatt stayed so calm, almost rehearsed, it was too smooth, too confident. My mind screamed with the realization that this had been going on behind my back, maybe for weeks, maybe longer. I turned to Joel, hoping for something solid to hold on to, but what I saw on his face almost broke me. He was pale, his eyes locked on Wyatt, not with shock anymore, but with a cold kind of knowing. His jaw worked as though he was forcing words down, trying to keep them from spilling out. His hands clenched at his sides, his whole body shaking with fury he was barely keeping under control. Finally, he spoke, his voice tight but steady. "I knew," he said, his eyes never leaving his brother. "I didn't want to believe it, but I knew." His words cut through the room, sharp and final. My head snapped toward him, confusion swirling with the ache in my chest. "You knew?" I whispered, though it barely came out. Joel's gaze shifted to me, softer but still heavy. "I suspected," he said. "For weeks now. Little things didn't add up. The way he looked at you, the way Marin kept finding reasons to be around when we weren't expecting her." He swallowed hard, his voice cracking just slightly. "When we left earlier, I saw Wyatt's truck parked near the house. That's why I told you to turn around. I couldn't ignore it anymore." The room spun. My cousin, his brother. It wasn't just betrayal. It was betrayal rooted deep in blood and family. I stared at them, these people who had stood at holidays, at birthdays, who had shared meals in this very kitchen, and I felt like I didn't know them at all. Marin's lips trembled as she whispered another excuse, but I couldn't even listen. Wyatt's smugness faltered under Joel's glare, yet he still tried to stand tall. The lies filled the air, thin and desperate, but none of it mattered. The truth was already out, and it had destroyed everything we thought was safe. I finally found my voice, though it shook when I spoke. "How could you, Marin?" My words came out raw, torn from a place I didn't even know existed inside me. "Your family. You've been in my house, at my table, in my life since we were children. And this is what you do to me." For a moment, I thought she might break down, that she might cry or at least show a flicker of shame. But her expression hardened, her mouth twisting into something colder than I could have imagined. "You don't get it, Clara," she said flatly. "I've always been second to you. Everyone looks at you like you're perfect. You got Joel. You got the life I should have had. You don't deserve his loyalty. You never did." Her words cut through me like glass. Envy. That's what it was. All those smiles at family gatherings, all those times she leaned on me for advice, pretending to admire my life, it had all been poison underneath. My chest ached as though she had reached inside and squeezed my heart with her bare hand. Joel's face darkened, his fists clenching at his sides, but before he could speak, Wyatt stepped forward. His tone was mocking, full of disdain. "Joel, you're kidding yourself," he sneered. "Your marriage is already dead weight. You've been dragging it along for years. Marin and I? We have something real. You should thank me for pointing out what you don't want to admit." I staggered back as though he had struck me. His words echoed in my head, cruel and deliberate. "Dead weight. Was that what he thought of me? What he thought of us? The marriage I had poured myself into, the years I had built with Joel, dismissed with a smirk, as if none of it mattered. I looked at Joel then, searching for some anchor, and found him trembling with fury, his chest rising and falling too fast, his eyes burning with pain. The disgust on his face was almost unbearable to see. He looked at his brother not as family, not even as a rival, but as something beneath him, something unworthy of even standing in the same room. But for me, the pain was different. It wasn't just fury, it was grief. Grief for the cousin I thought I knew, for the trust one believed in, for the family I thought was unshakable. The ground beneath me felt fragile, like it could crumble at any second. Marin's eyes met mine, sharp and unrepentant. Wyatt's smirk lingered, his words still hanging in the air like poison. And I stood there, shattered, realizing the people who should have protected me had instead mocked everything I held sacred. The betrayal wasn't just in their actions, it was in their words, their contempt, their laughter at what Joel and I had built. And in that moment, surrounded by their cruelty, I felt the deepest kind of loss. The loss of family, of trust, of love that had been taken and twisted beyond repair. Joel guided me out of the hallway, his hand resting firm against my back, steadying me when my legs felt weak. He didn't speak, not then, not when my eyes burned with tears that refused to fall. His silence weighed heavier than any words. It wasn't the silence of confusion or fear. It was something colder, something deliberate. We sat in the living room, the dim light casting shadows on the walls. I expected him to break, to shout, to let everything spill out. Instead, he held me close, his arm wrapped around my shoulders, but his gaze stayed distant. He was already somewhere else, thinking, calculating. I could almost hear the storm inside him, though he kept it contained. I wanted to collapse, to bury myself in grief, and let the betrayal crush me, but something inside refused. The pain was sharp, yes, but beneath it, rage burned hotter. My cousin, his brother, they had stood in our home, tearing apart our marriage as if it meant nothing. I could not let them walk away from this untouched. Joel finally broke the silence, his voice low and steady. "This isn't new," he said. "It's been happening, and we've been blind to it." He rubbed his face, his jaw tight. "I need to know how far it goes." I looked at him, realizing he wasn't speaking from anger alone. He meant it. He would find out everything, every meeting, every secret, every time they had used our trust against us. And once he knew, there would be no coming back. Over the next few days, his actions were quiet but careful. He stayed late at the office, but I knew he wasn't working on clients. He checked accounts, looked through family records, noticed patterns that I had ignored. He studied Wyatt's behavior, tracked the little details that most people would miss. I did my part too. I didn't let myself sink into sorrow. I replayed every word Marin had said, every look I'd brushed aside in the past, every moment that now seemed loaded with hidden meaning. The more I thought, the more the fury grew. She had envied me for years, and he had mocked what I shared with Joel. They had made a game of tearing me down. One night, when Joel came home, he sat beside me without saying much. His hand found mine, and for a moment we simply breathed together, heavy with the same thought. We didn't need to speak the words out loud, but we both knew them. This wasn't going to end with tears or silence. It wasn't going to be swept under the rug like some ugly family secret. They had crossed a line too deep to ever step back from. We made no promises aloud, no grand vows. Just a look, a nod, a shared weight between us. Neither Marin nor Wyatt would walk away from this unscathed. Not after what they had done. Not after what they had taken. We didn't rush. That was the first choice we made. Rage wanted us to scream, to tell the whole family, to make them pay in front of everyone right away. But anger burns fast, and what we needed was precision. If they had been able to play their game in secret, then we would end it in the open, one careful cut at a time. The first step was distance. Joel and I stopped inviting them over. At family dinners, we kept conversation brief and polite, never giving them space to twist their words or excuse themselves. When someone asked why Marin or Wyatt weren't around as much, we shrugged and offered simple answers, nothing dramatic. Slowly, they began to notice the absence, the subtle shift in tone whenever their names came up. Behind closed doors, Joel was digging. Wyatt had always been close to the family business, working under their father, handling accounts and expenses. It gave him access to things no one questioned. Joel spent late nights combing through files, piecing together numbers. At first, I didn't understand the rows of figures, but then he showed me the patterns. Small amounts moved here and there, shifts that added up over time. Wyatt had been taking money, confident no one would notice. At the same time, I turned my focus on Marin. She had always been reckless, but now I paid attention. I spoke to people quietly, listening instead of pressing. It wasn't hard to find stories. She owed money to people she had no business borrowing from. She had left a string of broken friendships, half-paid bills, and messy relationships. I wrote it all down, every detail, every piece of proof I could collect. Together, Joel and I built a picture, not just of betrayal, but of who they truly were when no one was watching. It wasn't about yelling or throwing accusations. It was about being prepared so that when the moment came, there would be no escape. We tested the waters first. At a family gathering, Joel mentioned a small financial inconsistency, casual enough to seem like an observation. Wyatt shifted in his chair, his smile strained. A bead of sweat appeared at his temple, though no one else seemed to notice. That reaction alone told us we were on the right path. For Marin, it was simpler. I let slip a detail about one of her unpaid debts in front of an aunt. Nothing heavy, just enough to spark gossip. Within days, whispers spread. I didn't need to say much. The truth did the work for me. Each move was small, almost invisible, but it built pressure. They didn't know what we had, didn't know when we would reveal it. That uncertainty was our weapon. They had taken their time to betray us, so we would take our time dismantling. It wasn't dramatic, it wasn't loud. It was slow, deliberate, like a blade sliding between ribs. Every step brought us closer to the moment when there would be no pretending left, no lies strong enough to hold. The night of the gathering arrived, and everything looked ordinary on the surface. The long table was crowded with food, voices overlapped in conversation, and laughter echoed through the house. But Joel and I carried something heavier than small talk. We had chosen this moment carefully, when everyone who mattered would be present. Joel waited until after dinner, when plates were pushed aside and the family settled into that easy lull. He stood, his voice calm but firm. "There's something we need to talk about," he said. The room grew quiet, all eyes on him. He laid a folder on the table and opened it with deliberate care. Inside were the documents he had collected, page after page marked with numbers and transfers. He slid them toward their father. "Wyatt has been taking money from the business. Quietly, consistently, for months." The words hung heavy. For a moment, silence filled the room. Then the rustling of papers, the sound of disbelief turning into anger. Their father's face drained of color as he read, his hand trembling slightly. Joel explained each detail, every transfer, every false entry. The evidence was solid, undeniable. Wyatt tried to laugh it off at first, the same way he always did when cornered. "This is nothing," he said, his voice sharp. "You're twisting numbers around to make me look bad." But when his father slammed a hand against the table, demanding an explanation, the bravado cracked. His face crumbled under the weight of the truth staring back at him. His mother shook her head, eyes wide with shock. Siblings whispered among themselves, anger building with every passing second. The family that had trusted him now looked at him as a stranger. The business, their livelihood, had been put at risk, and there was no excuse strong enough to shield him. Joel didn't stop there. His voice stayed calm, almost too calm for the storm inside him. "And that's not all." He turned, his gaze locking on Wyatt with cold finality. "I saw you, that night, sneaking into my house with Marin." The air shattered. Gasps broke out around the table, heads snapping toward Marin, who sat frozen, her face drained of all color. The whispers turned into sharp voices, disbelief crashing into the room like a wave. Her parents looked at her, as though they couldn't recognize the daughter sitting before them. Wyatt's mouth opened, but no sound came out. His face was red, his jaw twitching as he searched for words that wouldn't come. The evidence had stripped him bare, and now the truth about Marin left him exposed completely. I stayed quiet, my hands folded tightly in my lap, watching as the people who had betrayed me lost their footing. Every set of eyes burned into them, no space left for lies or excuses. The trap had been set, and it had closed perfectly. Wyatt's theft, Marin's betrayal. Joel and I didn't need to raise our voices. The truth had done it for us. And in that moment, with the family's judgment crashing down on them, they knew there was no way back. The days after that gathering tore through Wyatt and Marin like a storm. The fallout was immediate, and there was no saving either of them. Wyatt was stripped of his role in the family business within a week. His father's voice had been sharp and final. "You don't handle another cent of this company." Years of trust, gone in a moment. His siblings refused to defend him. Where there had once been respect, there was only anger. He was left standing on the outside, a man who had gambled with his own family's future and lost. At home, things weren't better. His wife couldn't ignore the truth after Joel's words at the table. She had sat frozen then, her eyes darting between Wyatt and Marin, searching for denial that never came. Now she carried that silence into their house, her voice cold, her distance unmistakable. Neighbors began to whisper, and the walls that Wyatt once leaned on for support closed in around. His marriage bent under the weight of betrayal, and cracks spread fast. Marin's fall was just as brutal. Her parents, humiliated and heartbroken, shut their door on her. They had given her chance after chance, but this, sleeping with her cousin's husband's brother, in Clara's own home, was too much. They told her to pack her things, and by the end of the week, she was gone. No tearful goodbye, no softening of words. Just a slammed door and silence that spoke louder than anything. The rest of the family wanted nothing to do with her. The whispers that followed were merciless. Debts, broken friendships, nights spent in places she had no business being. Everything I had quietly gathered about her spilled out once the respect was gone. She had no ground left to stand on. She left town with little more than a bag in her bitterness, heading to a place where no one knew her name. I watched it all unfold without lifting a finger. I didn't shout. I didn't gloat. I simply stood back and let the weight of their choices crush them. The same people who had mocked me, who had looked me in the eye and dismissed the life Joel and I had built, were now stripped bare. Their cruelty had come full circle, and there was no escape. Joel never spoke much about satisfaction, but I could see it in the set of his shoulders, in the way he held me at night with a quiet steadiness. He had done what he needed to do, and now they were gone from our lives. For me, the satisfaction was colder. I had seen the smirks, heard the words meant to wound me, felt the sting of betrayal from those who should have protected me. And now, seeing them crumble piece by piece, I felt no pity. Only the sharp, steady comfort of justice. They had tried to destroy my dignity. Instead, they destroyed themselves. The weeks that followed felt strange, like stepping into a life that looked the same but no longer carried the same weight. The house was quiet again, not heavy with secrets, just still. Joel and I moved carefully at first, as though we were both afraid the ground beneath us might shift again. But slowly, we found a rhythm, one built not on pretending nothing had happened, but on the truth that had survived it. Joel carried guilt he didn't say out loud. I saw it in the way his eyes lingered on me, in the way his hand found mine more often than before. He had suspected, he had seen things, and though he had tried to protect me, part of him blamed himself for not stopping it sooner. I never blamed him. He was the one who made me turn that car around. He was the one who stood beside me when the truth broke open. If anything, I trusted him more deeply than ever, because when the world turned cruel, he didn't waver. For me, the scars sat differently. Family had always been a foundation in my life. Cousins, siblings, in-laws. I thought bonds like that were unshakable. Now I understood how fragile they could be. Betrayal had come from inside my own circle, and that wound didn't close overnight. But with every day that passed, with every quiet evening Joel and I spent together, the ache lessened. Not gone, but lighter. We learned to speak more honestly with each other, to leave nothing unsaid. Late at night, lying in the dark, I told him about the anger that still burned in me, and he admitted to the fear he had carried, the fear of losing me to the lies that had grown behind our backs. Those conversations didn't erase what had happened, but they stitched something stronger between us. Sometimes, when I drove past that stretch of road where Joel had first whispered for me to turn the car around, the memory washed over me. That single moment, his voice sharp with urgency, had changed everything. It had pulled back the curtain on something I never wanted to see, but it had also saved us. If I had ignored him, if we had kept driving, who knows how long the lies would have continued? Who knows how much deeper the betrayal would have cut? I thought about Marin, about Wyatt, about the wreckage they left behind. Once, I would have given anything to keep them close. Now, I felt nothing for their absence. They had chosen their path, and it had led them out of our lives. As painful as it was, betrayal had given me clarity. It had stripped away the illusions and left only what was real. And what remained was Joel and me, scarred but unbroken, bound tighter by the fire we had walked through together. Sometimes, the worst kind of betrayal is the very thing that shows you who's truly on your side. For me, that truth was Joel, and that truth was enough.